Richard Boyd Barrett needs no introduction, I think. He's a radical, passionate leftist. I think it's safe to say, People for More Profits Party was elected to Dún Laoghaire Town Council in 2009, and he's been a 2D since 2011, and causing trouble since long before that. If he'd been alive in 1916, I think it would have taken an army to keep him out of the GPO. To launch these two books tonight, I'd like to introduce Richard Boyd Barrett.
I'll bring my two copies up now. Yeah, first of all, I have to say I'm utterly honoured to have been asked by Lorcan and Conor to speak here at the launch of these two books, and I'm full of admiration for Lorcan for imagining this wonderful series, for Ruan, who we just heard, and I can guarantee you I'm not going to be as knowledgeable and as erudite about the history as Ruan was, and to O'Brien Press for having the courage to take on such an ambitious project, and obviously to Conor and Donal and all the authors who've committed to producing this wonderful series. And it really is a privilege to be asked to speak at that, and I think at this because I don't know about you, but I'm a little bit worried about what might happen around the centenary or celebrations, whatever we want to call it, of 1916. And my fear is that it will become a jamboree where competing political interests will try and claim the mantle of 1916 for rather narrow and less noble ambitions than the motives that drove the people who actually participated in that rebellion and laid down their lives in a fight for freedom and for independence and against empire and for a different and better society. That's my fear, that will happen, and signs on it. We'll have to do our very best to make sure that doesn't happen. And I think this series of books may help us navigate a little bit what we may experience over the next year, to remind us about what 1916 was really about the sort of people who were involved in it, the sort of backgrounds they came from, the lives that they lived, the courage that they displayed, the aspirations and the vision that drove them, and that hopefully will help us play our part in truly honouring the memory of 1916 and of those who fought on it, and maybe adjudicating on what is appropriate to celebrate that great event, that wonderful event. And I hope it will, because I think it's terribly important that we do make sure that it's not hijacked and stolen by people who really, in their involvement, I won't name names, but in their involvement in the events that may take place around 1916, are not really thinking about how we can truly honour that tradition and that struggle. And what I think about whenever I think back to 1916, when I read Lorcan's wonderful book on Connolly, or when I read anything about 1916, and again when I haven't finished either of them, but I've sort of read chunks out of both of them, but I'm certainly going to fully read both of them. But the sort of things that immediately come to mind are courage, first of all, political and personal courage, and vision. Really believing that something better is possible. I think that these sort of attributes and those sort of motives are what is so badly needed to sort of finally achieve the republic that the people who died in 1916 were fighting for. And I found in I think it was Donald's book a great quote which just struck me, not just about different perspectives on the world we live in and the fight to bring about change. That is quite interesting historically, but I think very much speaks to the battle that confronts us today at the beginning of the 21st century in trying to imagine a better Ireland and imagine a better world. And it was he quotes a guy called Brian Barton, who I don't actually know who he is, but who is writing about General Maxwell, who came over on the 28th of April, to help coordinate the British forces to suppress the rebellion. And it's an interesting passage. Barton notes, at root, Maxwell bore no real affection for Ireland and fully shared the prejudices of the English officer class. He thought Dublin cold and cheerless, its poverty and improvidence appalling. As for its people, the majority, he stated, seemed to be on the verge of madness, which finds its outlet in poetry and emotional traits. And I thought that was wonderful, a wonderful observation in the attitude of the powerful, the imperial overlords, the upper classes, towards the poor, towards the mass of ordinary people and the lives they lead, but also towards the aspiration that ordinary people have for a better world. That they frown with contempt on people being emotional, having conviction, in expressing their aspirations through poetry, having vision, wanting something different. That's just so much, I don't know what, but it's something they frown deeply upon. And that attitude still prevails. I was always curious before I got elected into Dáil Éireann about the sort of personal motivations of what you might call the political establishment, what drove them. And one of the things that sort of helped explain it to me was when an official, a civil servant, said, what they can't understand about the likes of you, being the new crop of troublemakers or lefties or independents who got in and broken up the club a little bit, is that you're a conviction politician. You guys are conviction politicians. And I kind of was a bit stunned by this, and I thought, but isn't that what all politics is supposed to be about conviction and idealism and belief? Even if they're different convictions and beliefs, that's what's driving people. But the point he was making, this civil servant, is that in his experience, and he'd worked with politicians for many, many years, is that was a minority. That the culture of the political establishment is to frown on conviction, to imagine idealism as being just absolutely childish, and not really what politics is about. The politics is more about fairly ruthless and cynical, self-serving, personal or political ambition rather than being about the realisation of ideals and political conviction. And that's, to me, what we need to remember as we head into next year, and why these books that remind us of that, of the incredible courage and vision and commitment of these people who made the ultimate sacrifice for those things. And you know, when Ivan says they would have had to fight to keep me out, I'd like to think that's true, but you know, really, when you think about it, and when you read in the passages of you know, about MacBride and sort of ambling into this situation and saying, well, I'm going to go out, knowing that they were probably going to be executed, and both of them being in a position when they had to surrender, where they could have escaped and survived, and made a decision not to, because of the, as they saw it, the importance of going the whole way, as it were, to inspire others about, you know, the nobility and importance of their cause. I mean, that is courage that is hard to imagine, and it's certainly courage that is badly lacking. And I don't know if I'd have that kind of courage, to be quite honest. But it is certainly something to remember and aspire towards, in some way, to remember that that's what politics should be about. That sort of courage and conviction. And I mean, I'll finish by saying that, you know, one of the things that struck me kind of in that regard as well was I was looking at the arts budget, because another big feature of 1916 was how this political idealism and conviction sort of intertwined with the cultural and artistic movement. And I was looking at the arts budget for the next few years, and I didn't know, because you're dealing with so many things in the Dáil, but I didn't realise just how pitiful the arts budget is in Ireland. It's one of the lowest spends as a proportion of GDP of almost any country in Europe, which is quite amazing when you consider